What's up, all my Erudite friends out there? My name is Jeff Kowalk, and you are watching Erudite Magic. Today's topic should be of interest to anyone who's ever done any work with cards, because I want to talk about how you can get started with memorized deck work. Because magic is so secret, there's not a lot of great information out there about why you should do MemDeck work and which one should you choose. We're going to talk about all of that in this video, so buckle up, let's go. Of course, what kind of video would it be for Erudite Magic if I didn't have some book recommendations for you at the end? So after we talk about this, I will tell you what my personal stack is, as well as what resources you can look to further your education in MemDeck work. So the first question is, what is MemDeck work? Well, MemDeck is short for memorized deck. Shh, I know. This isn't really exposure. The only real people watching this are magicians. So a true MemDeck is taking a stack of cards, 52 pieces of pasteboard, and memorizing them in order from 1 to 52, and knowing both the value that sits at a number and the number for that card's value. Once you know both of those pieces of information cold, you're set to do almost any miracle with a memorized deck. I know what you're thinking. I'm not interested in memorizing 52 objects. That sounds like way too much work. But let me put it to you this way. In the words of Ozzy Wind in his book Repertoire, talking about memorizing, don't you think you know probably 52 words in a different language? So even though you may not speak Spanish, you probably could learn 52 different Spanish words and what they mean. This is not that much different. It's really not that much to ask, and it will greatly expand the possibilities for you in both working with other magicians and entertaining an audience. Not to mention, there's this idea behind some card magic or magic in general that when you put in the work and you present this to an audience, that performance is going to carry additional weight to it because you're going to know that you've put in the work and that this is really going to be worth that effort. You really can't put a price on that. Let's be clear. A MemDeck is simply a tool in your belt. It is not the be-all, end-all of card magic. But I have a really hard time thinking of scenarios where a MemDeck would not at least help with your magic. One of the things that I love about it so much as an erudite is that it is so devious. No one could possibly imagine that you would waste your time memorizing the order of 52 pieces of paper simply in order to entertain an audience. And in fact, the task seems so arduous that even if the method comes to people's heads, their brain tells them to deny it because no one would waste their time doing that. What is a MemDeck not? Well, it's not a cyclical stack. If you're using a cyclical stack, such as Cy Stebbins, wow, say that 5 times fast. If you're using a cyclical stack, Cy Stebbins, 8 Kings, Osterland Breakthrough card system, while those are wonderful stacks and have their place in the world of card magic, they're not truly a memorized deck unless you have a card that starts at 1, ends at 52, and you always know the number that you relate to that card. So what are the real advantages of using a MemDeck? There are miracles that are possible only with a MemDeck that are not possible using any other method in card magic. Not to mention, many times it can enhance the effects that you already do. For example, if you perform Triumph, the original by Di Vernon, instead of having someone choose a card, you can get someone to think of a card. A MemDeck will give you more choices when making those decisions. So let's get into it. What are the major stacks? The major stacks of which I'm aware are the Aronson stack and the Mnemonic stack. There are others, and we'll get into those in a second, but I want to touch briefly on the 2 big ones. I don't have any scientific data, but my assumption is that over 75% of MemDeck proponents use one of those 2 systems. The Aronson stack was created by Simon Aronson, I believe, in the 70s. In fact, he was one of the first people to reintroduce the world of magic to a memorized stack. Juan Tamariz of Spain is the creator of the Mnemonic stack, and it's equally as popular as the Aronson stack, if not more popular. The reason I bring these up as the two big ones is because it's a little bit like learning to speak English and Spanish. What do I mean by that? That you can choose to speak English, you can choose to speak Spanish. The advantage is that you will be able to communicate with others and have the same set of words to use when you're speaking. There are tricks that are designed that are specific to the mnemonic stack. There are tricks that are designed specifically to the Erudite stack. But the point is that if you're using one of those two stacks, most of the memorized deck work in the world will be designed with you in mind. There are other stacks. I know Woody Aragon has come out with his stack. Patrick Redford has released his. There are a myriad of others who've come out with their own version of a memorized stack with good reasons for their stacks. If you're considering choosing one, you'll want to look into the advantages and disadvantages. To me, the main disadvantages of using one of the smaller stacks, such as Woody Aragon's or Patrick Redford's or someone else's, is that there aren't as many people using it. So to come up with things that are specific to that stack, or if you're wanting to jazz around with friends, you're better off choosing one of the top two, Mnemonica or Erudite. I'm not putting down those smaller stacks. They're just going to have less utility when it comes to interacting with other magicians and brainstorming. But if you don't do that, you probably want to consider one of those stacks. So let's get into these big two. What are the primary differences? Erudite's stack has a lot more gambling things built into it. I don't know how he actually came up with it, whether there was any intent to have things built in. However, with the Mnemonica stack, he approached it because he wanted it to be able to be shuffled into stack from a new deck order, and he wanted it to be able to convert to a stay stack order. So what's stay stack? Stay stack is where the top card mirrors the bottom card as a mate. The second card from the top mirrors the second from the bottom card all the way till you get to the middle. In the middle of the pack at the 26th and 27th card, those two cards are mates. There are lots of uses for a stay stack. The point is simply that the Mnemonica stack can go from that to a stay stack with a simple procedure. There have been attempts to come up with a way to get into Erudite stack from new deck order. I'm sure those work. I've never deployed it because to me the entire reason to use a MemDeck is because you're either going to, one, ring the deck in after letting someone else shuffle it, or you're just going to start out with your own stack and either do a false shuffle or forego shuffling because no one cares. So if it's important to you, that could be a consideration. Now, how much work is memorizing a stack going to be? I assure you, it's nothing as bad as you think it will. Your mind is going to make it far more fearful and intimidating than it really is. So how do you memorize a deck? Well, I brute forced it. That is, I didn't use any mnemonic pegs, I didn't use any phonetic alphabets. I simply made the list and memorized it one at a time. It probably took me 2 to 3 weeks of maybe 30 minutes a day practicing to actually get the stack down. Frankly speaking, that's probably the hard way. But after 3 weeks, I was good enough with the stack that I could perform some effects. Of course, the longer you use it, the more comfortable you are and the more things that you can actually do with the stack. So let's talk about the resources that are at your disposal for a MemDeck and what the differences are. The first resource is one that you may already have on your shelf, and that is the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks. At the very back of the book, the Nicola card system is taught, and it is a way to memorize the deck in a very short period of time, and then gives you a number of uses for a memorized deck. To teach you the stack, they use the phonetic alphabet, and so of course that phonetic alphabet can really be used to memorize almost anything else. So that system is already here. So if you own this book, you already have a way to memorize any deck, which could be your own choosing. Several of the effects in here for the Nicola card system are specific to that stack. However, most of them are not, and you'll already see a few ways that you can perform some pretty incredible card magic using a MemDeck. So what if you're going to choose one of the big two, but you're really not sure which one? Then I would recommend, if you're thinking about putting some serious effort into this, picking up The Memory Arts by Sarah and David Trustman. This book was put out a few years ago in 2017, and there are versions where you can download it online. I happen to have the hardcover book here, and it covers a visual system of mnemonics. So originally there's a history behind mnemonics, how they help, the mind palace, why this works, and tips to make it work for you. And then they give you their visual system to memorize 26 different pegs. After they've given you the pegs and you've worked through those, you can map cards to those using another visual system that gets overlaid on top of the pegs. That makes it sound complex, but it's probably one of the faster paths to actually learning a stack. In this book, the hardbound book, they teach you their 26 pegs for the Aronson stack, they teach you their 26 pegs for the mnemonica stack, and then they give you a full 52 pegs so that you can map either the individual stack to those 52 pegs, or you can memorize 2 decks and be bilingual in terms of your MemDeck language. They also give you tips on how to memorize other things like phone numbers, names, lists for the grocery store. So there's some practical advice in this book as well about how mnemonics can improve your life, not to mention your magic. The book is just a little bit pricey. It's $50. That's not a value statement. I'm just saying that if you're thinking about getting into MemDeck Work, it may be more than you want to spend up front. I think it's worth it if you are more of a visual learner. You'll learn a system that you can deploy for almost anything else. So if you are a part-time professional, this will certainly help you in your career, and it will also help you do some really cool magic with cards. If you're wondering what kind of things are possible with a MemDeck, look no further than Woody Aragon's The Show. It's sold as a DVD or download from Vanishing Ink to show you an entire theater show put together using nothing more than a memorized deck. The show itself is free. That is, you can watch Woody's performance. I believe it's a 45-minute show. It'll give you an idea of the types of miracles that can be done with a MemDeck. So if you're contemplating whether or not you should invest the mental power into a MemDeck, I advise you to watch the show and see how the miracles performed there make you feel. If it's something that you can't get your head around how he could do it, remember that feeling, write it down, and then get busy working on a MemDeck so that you too can perform those same miracles for paying audiences. I don't typically recommend DVDs. However, if you are interested in the show and want to learn those tricks, I think you'll probably have to buy that DVD, and it may be a way for you to learn the stack, which is really the most important thing to me. If you're thinking about going with mnemonica, well then, of course, you're going to be interested in the book itself, Mnemonica by Juan Tamariz. This is a very meaty book, and it would be a mistake to think that it's only about mnemonica. Of course, he gives you a little history at the beginning about different stacks, talking about some of those cyclical stacks, the memorized stacks, just a tiny bit of history. He gets right into his stack and gives you 5 different ways that you can memorize his stack. His assertion is that you can actually memorize his stack in 4 or 5 hours, all in one day, if you're willing to put that work into it. I don't actually use mnemonica, so I've never put that work into it. The book is well laid out and organized. It's got a ton of tricks, so it spends most of the time talking to you about effects that you can do with a memorized deck or ways to enhance your existing magic. It's broken down into segments, some of which are specific to mnemonica and others that can deploy any stack that you want. In addition, it has full deck uses, stay stack uses, and then when your deck is half stacked, because maybe part of it has been disrupted with a shuffle. Even though I don't use mnemonica myself, I certainly think that this book is a valuable addition to the MemDeck Proponents Library because it's going to teach you different ways to think about using a MemDeck, and it's just such a huge compendium. There's also sleights in here, how to shuffle, and other different sleights that Juan Tamariz has come up with. So I don't think if you're a true student of MemDeck work or card work in general, you're going to need to read Juan Tamariz as part of your education. If you're thinking about going with the Aronson stack, in my mind, you're going to want to start with one of 2 books, either Try the Impossible or Bound to Please. Bound to Please is the earliest release of Simon Aronson, released in the 90s, but is really a compilation of 4 different books, which includes not only his stack to remember, which is what he calls the Aronson stack, but also his shuffleboard, which has nothing to do with MemDeck work whatsoever, but is probably one of the best magic tricks with a pack of cards that you'll ever see. There are plenty of other ideas in Bound to Please that don't necessarily use a MemDeck. I don't think that this is the best place to start if you're wanting to learn the Aronson stack, but I toss it out there because as of right now, this book is eminently affordable. I believe it's around $26 to get started, and he does teach you his peg system using the phonetic alphabet to learn his stack. Frankly, if I were recommending to someone they were just getting started with MemDeck Work and were thinking about choosing the Aronson one, I would recommend Try the Impossible. The reason is because it is really 3 different books in one. The first book is the Undue Influence Control, which is an incredible premise in Magic. You may have seen this done on Penn and Teller Fool Us or other places. It's a way to control 2 different cards to 2 different locations in an impossible and self-working way. The first time you walk through the Undue Influence Control with cards in hand, you're going to fool yourself. It's really that clean and easy. The rest of that book at the beginning of this one goes to dealing with other variations on this theme, including some that involve a memorized deck, but will require a much more proficient knowledge of the stack than a beginner is probably going to have. So it's something to grow into. In the middle of the book are eccentrics, which are different card tricks that he's put out, some of which use gaffed cards. It's different than the typical memorized deck work you'd probably see from Simon Aronson. And then the final piece, which is why I recommend it to beginners, is he talks about unpacking the stack. He gives you his stack to remember, the Aronson stack, and he also gives you a whole group of tricks that use the stack but don't require you to have the stack memorized. In addition, at the end of each trick, you're back in stack order. So it's perfectly designed for the beginner or someone who's just getting started with MemDeck Work because you don't have to worry about anything. You don't even have to know the stack. You just have to be in stack order. Within the unpacking the stack section, there are a lot of tricks that have to do with a spectator choosing a card, and you find the card, and when you reveal it, you turn over some other cards, and they are the mates to that one. And he has a number of those that go all the way from ace through king, and so you don't have to have the stack memorized. The problem is that it's slightly repetitive because you're probably not going to perform these effects back to back to back. But there are still other tools in this book, and there's a way to do a poker deal where everyone gets a really nice hand of poker, but you end up with the royal flush. And as soon as you're done and you put everything back, you can instantly repeat it. So if you're a walk-around style performer, most people don't think of MemDeck Work going with walk-around, but in fact you can with this, and it could be a very entertaining piece for the right performer. I will caveat the recommendation for the Simon Aronson books. The writing style is a bit dry. Simon was very methodical. He was an attorney. He had a very erudite mind. And when he writes, he also writes in a very sophisticated, intelligent way. So if you want to know all of the subtle workings of what was going through his mind, he spells that out for you. However, it also can make for some dry reading if you're not used to absorbing that type of material. So what stack do I use? I use the Aronson stack, and as I said, I brute forced it over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm proficient now enough where I can pick up a book on MemDeck Work and deploy the Aronson stack. I know the numbers, I know the cards and the values, I can even do some of the math in my head. You'll get there too, and like I said, this tool is an invaluable one in your belt. I have friends who at one point thought that it would be way too much work to get involved with a memorized stack. They've subsequently changed their mind, put in the work, and I believe that they're as happy as can be that they did because they have those additional tools, and when they read other books that suggest a memorized stack as the method, they're not intimidated. They can evaluate whether this fits in their repertoire and if they want to entertain audiences with those tricks. So at the end of the day, what's my recommendation? My recommendation would be to pick up either Try the Impossible or Mnemonic, depending on your budget. Mnemonic is $65, so it's certainly going to cost you more than most of the others, but it's also the meatiest book with the most information in it on using a memorized deck. The Tamara's book, in my opinion, is more accessible to a beginner because just the writing style is more brief. The effects go boom, 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 boom. So I think that a beginner might find more there, but it can also be a bit intimidating because there's nothing in there that starts for beginners and works you up to advanced. They're just in there by the category, whether it's mnemonica specific, whether it's open to any stack, half stack, etc. The Memory Arts book is great, but it doesn't teach you any tricks. It really is just a system to memorize a MemDeck. One other option that I want to point out is Simon Aronson released Memories Are Made of This, which is a small pamphlet that you can download for free. I'll put a link down below. He will give you his stack so that you'll know what the stack is, and he gives you a trick to help you ring in a deck that has been stacked from a deck that has been shuffled, with a very interesting and entertaining effect that goes with it. So if you're thinking about getting started, that may be the place to go, and that's in fact how I got started. There are, of course, plenty of other books on the subject of memorized deck work and tricks that use a stack. Some that come to mind, Ozzy Wynn's repertoire has a great number of effects that use a memorized stack. Patrick Redford has put out a number of books on his stack, as well as stack independent tricks. Some of them that I've seen live with him performing at Magi Fest have been just absolutely mind-blowing, even if you already know how a MemDeck works. Barry Richardson has ideas, Richard Osterland has ideas. There are so many people out there who have ideas and tricks that are just waiting on you to learn a memorized stack. So my best advice is, as I said before, action. Pick one, go with it. Don't get hung up on which one you should choose. Poll your friends, find out what they're using, and then go with that, because that's really going to allow you to work on the stack with them and find out what kind of tricks work well. They can demo things, walk you through moves, and if you both have a deck in the same stack, it's so much easier to talk about that and learn the moves, figure out if you're in the right place. I hope you'll give serious consideration to using a MemDeck if you're a card worker. It doesn't have to be intimidating, and it doesn't really have to be scary. It's a pretty simple thing. Best of luck in your memorized deck endeavors, and if there's any way I can help you with either making the choice about which one to use or giving you more information about some of the other books, don't hesitate to ask. Well, as always, my Erudite friends, I appreciate you watching, liking, subscribing, telling your friends about this channel. I do it all for you. Thank you so much. As always, if there are any questions that I didn't get to, don't be afraid to comment down below. I am an open book. Until next time, keep reading.